I think what I'm trying to say after all that long-winded speech is use common sense. When all else fails, use common sense. Okay, now, I probably have spoken about using common sense before. And one would think, why would you have to talk about using common sense? Because that's just common sense. What I see happening everywhere from the top to the bottom is that sometimes it's hard to use common sense when you realize that you're not spiritually pure and and you're trying to see through shastra and you're not actually sure that your common sense is actually Krishna conscious. And I think that's a valid consideration that, use my common sense. Who am I? I'm just like, I'm a lecha, my common sense. So that does have validity, but if extended too far, then you won't use common sense when you should, and then you'll make bad decisions. And so it gets confusing for many devotees when they read something in Shastra, they hear something in class, and it seems like, well, this is exactly what we should do. But then trying to apply it in the world, it doesn't seem like that's going to work. And sometimes it seems like not only is it not going to work, it's going to make things worse. So then you think, okay, if this, I know sounds strange, and someone's going to want to hang me for saying this, but I'll say more than this, but I want to start with this. Sometimes we actually need to just say, okay, I want to put this shastra right here on the table, and I just want to look at this situation and think, what would be common sense in this situation? Like, what would be, like, if I didn't have shastra, I didn't have all these things over my head saying, this is right, this is wrong, what are people going to think? You're going to walk into the temple and, they're going to shoot arrows at you for doing this. Just think, what would be, if I didn't have that consideration, what would I do? And I know that's generally not the way we preach. We preach, see through shastra, take guidance from guru and so forth. And I'm not saying not to do that, but the reason I'm saying this is that sometimes in some situations, the answer that a devotee is looking for is not actually shastric. It's a material situation that needs a common sense answer. It's not outlined in shastra. The shastric principle is simply, how will this solution help you in your Krishna consciousness? That's what the shastra is saying. That's how the shastra is directing you, and the shastra is directing you philosophically in so many ways. But in many situations, trying to bring the shastra in, if a devotee is not mature, they make bad decisions where they throw out common sense and they are trying to follow what the shastra is. And inside, intuitively, they think, well, shouldn't it be this way? But shastra says this, but they've misunderstood because they're not so mature. So sometimes I feel like, okay, put that aside. Let me ask you, just common sense-wise, what would you do? Okay, now we got that answer. Now bring this other consideration over and say, can you make that work with this? And just say, well, I could do this and that, and they seem to work together. In many, many cases, that's going to be the best situation. And I'm just speaking from experience of something that's really, it's really disheartening for me to see intelligent devotees make bad decisions because they're trying to follow the shastra, but it hasn't been explained to them, shastra, in a broad enough way that when they're trying to apply it, they're not using common sense. And then later on, when they're older devotees, they'll say things like, I was so stupid. Why was I thinking like that? Why did I make that? Was just a common sense decision. Why did I do this? Why didn't I see this? Because we're like trying to be good little Hare Krishnas, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama. Good little Hare Krishnas, and I didn't see like anything. So, it's a balance. I'm not saying that your common sense is always the best situation. I'm not saying throw out the shastra. I'm just saying sometimes I've had this experience where you're asking a question and the answer is not actually from Shastra, it's just common sense. Niti Shastra, you know. And then I think we had discussed that, and Jiva Goswami said that what you read in Shastra should make sense with what you see in the world. And so if you have them like, well, what I see seems completely different. Maybe you're not understanding what's in the Shastra, or maybe you have to understand the Shastra based on what you see to try to get it to make sense, because sometimes we see them as two distinct things. Of course, sometimes it's transcendental. You can't see it. You can't understand it. The Shastra is describing things beyond. But when it's describing things which are more logical and relevant to life now, it should make sense. And if it doesn't make sense, I would just say, maybe that's a red flag that I didn't understand it. Or maybe it's a red flag that I'm afraid to use common sense for whatever reason, because I think I don't have any, or it'll get me in trouble because it got me in trouble for millions of lifetimes. Or I'm afraid to listen to my intuition because I'm not in touch with the super soul, etc., etc. So it may be true that your intuition totally misguides you, your common sense totally misguides you, but my experience is that generally it doesn't misguide you. Generally, you get misguided when you don't understand Shastra. That's more of my experience. So I think that's important for you to consider. And I think all of you, would do really well when you're trying to make a decision. Just first ask yourself, okay, well, what's the common sense decision here? I'll just we'll worry about Shastra later. Well, what would make sense practically in this situation? Well, practically in this situation, this guy's a bum and I should throw him in the trash can, right? Well, what does Shastra say? The Shastra says, you have to be submissive and tolerant and chaste, and you shouldn't get divorced, and, okay. So now you have to deal with both things, the trash can or, worshiping him as God. Maybe there's a mix. But if this guy is a bum and he is abusive and he's useless and he's, he's hopeless as a husband and a father, and everybody's telling you that, then that's like common sense. Yeah, but Shastra says, but Prabhupada says, you could get yourself into all kinds of trouble, especially if the person's abusive. So you see what I'm saying? That sometimes it's like, no, it's just obvious this isn't going to work. No, but Shastra says this and that. And that's when devotees can really get themselves in trouble. So that's all I'm saying, sometimes you just need to look at common sense first and go, okay, common sense says this, let me look at the Shastra, let me try to understand and balance it, because sometimes there's no balance with common sense. It's just Shastra and you don't even understand it, the Shastra properly. And the Shastra is also common sense as well.